Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today's Thursday, September 11th, 2025. Holy smoke, 24 years on from 9/11. And Charlie Kirk, oof, that's a big one, right? So what happened yesterday is I've got a lot of tabs on it, and we're not going to get to it during the free show this morning, unfortunately, but I do talk about Charlie Kirk a lot today. There's a huge, more than a usual grab bag of governance. There's, I don't know, probably 20 tabs on Charlie Kirk, and I think it's more complicated than it first seems. And I was surprised when it was reported that he made it to the hospital alive, because looking at him on that chair after the shooting, he wasn't moving. He was done, right? Like, it didn't seem like that's a survivable shot. So regardless of all of that, terribly sad. A young family loses its father. The United States loses a potential future president, people were saying, but a statesman nonetheless, and somebody who is going around engaging youth. And it feels different somehow than even the attempt on Trump's life. The fact that this one succeeded, it was radical. Well, it looks like more than just an angry student. I don't think this was an amateur. I don't think this was somebody who was doing this just for fun or fame or anything like that. I think there's much more to it than that, and we'll explore that later in the show today. Carbon tax allowance. Yes, they're talking about this in Australia, and I was saying the Liberals are wanting to add QR codes to grocery stores to inform you about the carbon in your food, because you're going to have to measure that at some point, and that's what they're pushing us towards. And Australia is saying that very, very clearly. Very concerning. We're going to talk about that. Article 4 and 5 in NATO, and Trump's response. Trump saying, what's this whole thing about Putin invading Poland with drones? Here we go. So we'll find out about that. I've got that to talk about as well. Carney says we're in a crisis, and then talks about hockey. He says McDavid's not signed. That's it. And that's a joke. And he keeps going back to the well, and nobody laughs the second time. So we'll show you that. France strike, and they want to impeach Macron, and he's trying to move forward with a new prime minister. I guess he's appointed 5, and this is the 5th one. And the citizens are saying no. There was supposed to be a strike. I think there was supposed to be a strike yesterday. I don't know what's going on today in France, because yesterday Charlie Kirk took over X, and that was the only thing anybody was talking about after that happened. And the biggest story in Canada, and this is Canada Poly, so we are starting in Canada today, is no pipelines. No pipelines in all of the nation building projects. The crisis that Carney said was in place and in play in January 2025, and when the election was called and when he took over and so on and so forth. He says, I'm here because there's a crisis. He was making jokes all through the announcement of this crisis and the looking over this crisis and examining this crisis. He's cracking McDavid jokes, and I think it's completely inappropriate. But there's no pipeline, and people are upset. They're pushing back. Here's Mark Carney, and Ryan says, Carney confirms what we already knew. Canada is completely effed under this government. Just listen to this nonsense, and it is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Here's Mark Carney talking about McDavid.
Tomorrow, we'll announce the first tranche, the first batch of these projects.
Oh, no, I don't know if he actually talks about McDavid here. There is a McDavid one coming up, but not this one.
Projects that will increase Canada's independence, boost our economy, align with the interests of Indigenous peoples, and advance our climate goals. Canada's new government recognizes that addressing climate change isn't just a moral duty that we have to our kids and grandkids. It is that moral duty. But it's also an economic imperative for the competitiveness of our businesses and the workers they employ. And so to those ends, this fall, we will release a new climate competitiveness strategy that focuses on results over objectives and investments over prohibitions. Third, we will remain relentlessly focused on bringing down costs for Canadians, building on the elimination of the consumer carbon tax, building on that middle-class tax cut. For example, during the summer, we took a decision to uphold the CRTC's plan to expand mandatory wholesale access. That's a mouthful. Mandatory wholesale access. What's in it for Canadians? One thing. It will reduce broadband costs for Canadian families. That's why this government took that decision, because we are relentlessly focused on Canadian affordability.
Removing the wholesale access to broadband would kill people or businesses like Tech Savvy, or I don't know if Videotron's on any of the big guys' network, but they use a certain part of the big guys' switching because it's very difficult to build your own, very expensive, and there have been tax dollars invested in building out Bell and Rogers switches and things like that. And I'm talking very just vaguely on this. It's much more complicated than that. But if the Liberal government had removed that, then they would have destroyed a bunch of independent internet service providers, and it would have been out of step with what they've done for the last 40 years anyway, 30 years since the internet's been around. So it's quite an interesting situation. He's saying, oh yeah, we're looking out for you, but he's not looking out for Canada. Roman Babber says no oil pipelines on Mark Carney's list of major projects. Present day Liberals are climate extremists who impoverish Canadians. I think that's true. I think that's accurate. CBC watchers responding to Dwayne. Dwayne says, Carney will argue that there's no private developer proposing a pipeline project. Smith will rebut by saying that unless laws are changed, no company will want to come forward. I think that that's true. This guy's saying, well, he put in a pipeline executive, so he's signaling that they're going to build a pipeline, which I think is absolute nonsense. It is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Oh, look, he's signaling that there's going to be a pipeline by appointing this pipeline crony. Okay, that's good news? It's not good news. CBC watcher says CBC can't even tell the truth about why pipeline firms have rejected Canadian pipeline projects. So the article headline on CBC is Carney and Smith want a new pipeline. So far, no company has stepped up to build it. And yeah, well, there's no company. Why isn't there a company? Let's see, CBC watcher, break it down for us. He says these companies made it clear. The government's legislation on tanker bans, emissions caps, C-69, also known as the No More Pipelines Act, make it impossible. It is why Justin Trudeau had to buy TMX to get it built. It's why Carney had to pass Bill C-5, a bill to override these pieces of legislation. Is there supposed to be a period at the end of this sentence? Where's the editing CBC? I mean, there is here, but not here. Where's the editing CBC? Oh, it's CBC Watcher. It's not CBC. Okay, sorry, CBC Watcher. But C5, why would the Conservatives support C5 when just repealing the existing laws would have had the same net effect and be better overall as a solution? Why would the Conservative government support this? Why won't the Conservative government topple this government? Because they support them. So that's the only conclusion I can come to. Anyway, why does the CBC need to keep up the charade and that it honestly reports on anything to do with what it considers climate related? CBC even reported this, see the first reply, but can't include the fundamental problem is this fake analysis. CBC and media activists propaganda are the primary obstacle to pipelines. CBC has been a declared climate activist organization for almost 4 years. So they're actively working to promote this hoax. I mean, and it is a hoax. Pierre Poilievre is responding to Mark Carney. Mark Carney says he understands the frustrations of pro-independence Albertans, and I don't think he does. And Pierre Poilievre says, you know what would heal those frustrations, sir? Approving an oil pipeline. Put it on your list tomorrow. Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. I think Alberta would say, you don't get any of this money from our pipeline. This is our money for our pipeline to do independent things in Alberta for ourselves, not for Quebec. And I think that's the reaction Alberta would give Mark Carney. But we'll see. We'll see. Mark Carney says, good to meet with Premier Danielle Smith today in Edmonton. The Premier and I are focused on getting big things built here to empower Albertans and build greater prosperity for Canadians. And this is just a total propaganda video. Here, watch. It's got all the bloops and bleeps. Clicks. Claps. I don't understand. Why do people like to listen to this? Soft guitar. Oh, look, we're at a meeting. La, la, la. It's ridiculous. Most honestly. Some PR firm has this soft guitar with clicks and claps, and they just put it over everything. And for some reason, this is palatable to us. It's better than silence. I don't know. I don't know. Let's talk about crime. So there was a man from Welland, and he identifies as a woman, and he sexually assaulted a 12-year-old, was arrested, then let out on bail. Then while out on bail, he broke into a family's home and raped a 3-year-old. And now yesterday he was in the courthouse, and they're talking about bailing him, about letting him go again on bail. Toronto Crime Watch says hundreds have shown up to the St. Catharines courthouse ahead of child predator Daniel Senkal's bail hearing. Police have closed down the streets to traffic as the crowd was so large. So that's a lot of people, and they're there. And what do they want? Well, they said bail him, send him outside. You let him out of jail. It's cool. We'll deal with him. So Toronto Crime Watch again says a large angry crowd is gathered outside of the Niagara Detention Center where registered child sex offender Daniel Senkal is being held. So they're saying, send him on out. It's okay. We support that action.
Pedophile scum! Pedophile scum! Give him to us! Give him to us! Give him to us! Daniel Lance! Pedophile scum! Pedophile scum! Pedophile scum!
So they were chanting, pedophile scum, give him to us. So I don't know what they do with him. I'm sure. Well, justice isn't being served in our country. So at this point in time, when people decide that justice isn't being served, they feel like this is a good solution. Mob justice is better than no justice, right? Jing Lai says a massive protest breaks out right outside of the St. Catharines courthouse where Daniel S. is set up and are making their voices heard. So, yep, that's interesting, right? And people do not have faith in the justice system because they're saying, give that guy to us. We'll deal with him, promise. Very interesting. Jay says a video. So this is an Uber driver being held up by a guy with a gun. Right? This is a nightmare. It looks like he's got a modified clip in there. The clip looks to be like longer, and I've seen that you can make handguns fully automatic with a certain modification. And again, I'm not a gun guy, so take everything with a grain of salt, please. But it seems like this guy's got a lot of ammunition in there, right? And this would be a nightmare situation. I was at a gun range, and I mean, like, I've tried shooting, right? I've shot weapons. I've shot an FN and I've shot a 303. And like I was in cadets, right? And so I've done that. And I went to a gun range more recently as an adult. And I was just uneasy with the guns. And I shouldn't be. I was like, these people are, professionals and nobody's just going to go crazy and like just start shooting or anything like that. But still, there was a little bit of, I was making sure I was in the right place. I was making sure I was listening to, the things that the guys who were running the shoot were telling me. I felt more comfortable on an outdoor range personally than I did in an indoor range. But anyway, that's a different story. But all of this, sitting in a car with somebody who means to harm me and he's pointing a gun at my head, that's a nightmare situation. Thanks very much. Like, no, thank you. That's really, I'm never going to be an Uber driver because of this, right? And so, and maybe, I used to think being a cab driver would be fun, talk to people, especially in Guelph after midnight, you could work 2 or 3 hours and make a lot of money just trucking people back and forth from downtown to the university, right? But nowadays, holy smoke, man! I don't want to take transit at all. You're likely to be attacked or worse. Jamie says, this is an update from the story of yesterday. Edmonton police caught wind of a plea deal that they believed to be extremely soft and unjust, so they're asking the Crown higher-ups to call it off. They say that they'll release more details about the crime if that doesn't happen. I wish more police services had the guts to do this. And so it worked, she says. It looks like it may have half worked. The Crown is no longer agreeing with defense on an 8-year sentence, though a plea deal was still entered to manslaughter, not first-degree murder. So first-degree murder carries minimum sentences and certain things, no bail, it's not bail, parole for 25 years or something like that. But if you get manslaughter, then you could get out much earlier, right? So still, I don't know if it's good enough or whatever, but it seems that there was some movement because the police stood up and said, no, I don't think so. Here's Ryan, and he's highlighting Mark Carney. This is the McDavid one. And this is inappropriate, right? Everybody laughs. In the next clip, when he drops McDavid, hoping for another laugh, nobody laughs. But this one, everybody laughs because this is right at the beginning of the speech, I think, and nobody was expecting it. So here's Mark Carney on the crisis, and then he starts joking around. So for me, that sends a mixed message. That says maybe the crisis is a big effing joke. Maybe that's what the crisis is. Here's Mark Carney on the crisis and McDavid.
And let's face it, we are in a crisis. We are in a crisis. The global trading system has been upended. Supply chains have been destroyed. McDavid is unsigned. This is not a transition. This is a rupture. As in times like these, you have to draw back in. Remember what you have. Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. We got to draw on those strengths. We got to draw on those values. And Connor, if there's anything that we can do in the upcoming budget, we're spending less. We're going to invest.
The crisis is in this guy's mouth. Like, the crisis is this guy doesn't brush his teeth. I don't know, man. Real Mr. Bench says, according to the great Mark Carney, he did not see this crisis in Canada when he was heading in to be installed as prime minister. So here is Mark Carney again talking about the crisis. And it is laden with hockey talk. And it, again, sends the message that he's not taking this seriously.
As I said, I launched my leadership campaign back in January. And it was a time when the crisis was not as obvious. We thought McDavid was going to be re-signed quickly. We would already have the cup by now. But the crisis facing our country, in all seriousness, was just coming into perspective, you think back at the start of January. And many didn't foresee the scale of the changes that would be required in response to this crisis. And these are changes that this government, you, are now delivering. So it is my great honor to return to Edmonton in the great company of 168 fellow Liberal MPs who are absolutely focused.
No jokes that time, right? So it is interesting as well that Mark Carney didn't see the crisis in January, but he was saying that this is the only reason he's here, and if there was no crisis, there'd be no Carney. It's all nonsense. Here's a little, this is our grab bag of governance, and Kayla Pollock is somebody who is paralyzed because of the COVID vaccine, she says, and I have no reason to doubt her or anything like that. And she is trying to access Elections Canada, Health Canada's vaccine injury arm, and it's been bogged down by corruption, and people have been in the intake phase for 3 years, and that's not good. And so Kayla has been asking people to get in touch with her MP, and that's yielded results. So she says, breaking news. For all of my followers who tagged my MP and the health minister, you helped make a difference. My story on Global News National, as well as 3 other hand-picked victims, put huge pressure on the government, and it worked. We exposed how the Liberals wasted $80.9 million of taxpayer money on administration instead of helping victims of vaccine injuries. Even people like me, left severely paralyzed, were stuck in the intake stage for over 3 years while they passed cases around. Now, Public Health of Canada will take over the vaccine injury SP. I don't know what the SP stands for offhand, sorry. This is a better alternative, less corruption. Ooh, I don't know about that. Like, PHAC was headed by Dr. Tam for way too long to say that there's less corruption. How much corruption is there? Like, man, there's a lot of corruption in the PHAC at this point in time. So hopefully the spotlight and the change of leadership will help, but we'll see. I'm sure there's a better way to solve this problem, but they've gotten a small win, and so I hope that it works out for them. Less waste, less corruption, and a real chance that funds will finally reach the vaccine injured. Fingers crossed. I'll be monitoring Kayla's public Twitter X account to see if that actually comes to fruition. I'll be interested to see. This does not erase, she says, the need for MPs to keep pressure on, especially to ensure victims like me and others are compensated sooner, not in 2026 or much later, while they start from scratch and build a new story. We did get what we wanted. We exposed the truth and forced change. This is a victory for all of us. So there you go. Good. But again, I think that we need much more change, and I think we need accountability as well. Without accountability, the people who did this will do it again. And man, it's just one of those things. Here is Graham, and he's talking about this situation reported by Blacklocks, and I'll explain. PSPC, I don't know what that is. Public Services and Procurement approved scrapping 19,000 new ventilators. They're new, without bothering to even open the shipping crates. A lone employee warned of high reputational risk if the taxpayers ever found out. And we found out, thanks to Blacklocks reporter, I guess. And Graham says the scandalous thing about this whole situation is that it's not a scandal. Young readers on this platform may not believe it, but there was a time in the past when this sort of thing would cause a Canadian government to fall. Now it's just another day. Yeah. $16 orange juice? The F you say, right? Get out. But apparently scrapping $19,000 or 19,000 ventilators, totally fine with no oversight or anything like that. And the guy who sold the ventilators was an MP, and now he's not anymore. Wasn't it Frank Bayless, right? Or I don't know. Wild and crazy stuff happening, and nobody is being held accountable by anybody at all. And I just think that's weird. Here is Mario, and he says, insanity. Metrolinx has been approved for Lima. They cannot find a Canadian to fill the position that pays $220,000 a year. No Canadians are qualified or anything like that. They don't know transit, like wherever. I wouldn't be surprised if it was from Nepal or something like that. Oh man, this guy was a high-level Nepalese government official. He knows how to run metro links. He's just doing fraud. Oh, well, that's how they run the government there. What? Communism, right? It's the same damn thing is happening here in Canada. And Dr. Oren says how much bribery and or blackmail has been happening behind the scenes with our politicians and their cronies. Yeah, I feel like this kind of Lima really is an international way to move people who they prefer out of country and into another country to start communist movements, start Confucius centers, start Khalistani protests with their flags. They're just moving people in order to destabilize, and it's a convenient way to excuse, like if you're somebody who's a comfortable communist in a country like Nepal, let's just say, and Nepal starts collapsing and you're like, oh man, I got to get out of Dodge. Where do you go, right? Like you've got to be protected. The global cabal that tells you, listen, yeah, you're going to do this, but don't worry, we're going to protect you. They're going to send you somewhere else. This is the golden parachute. We get to pay for their golden parachute. And they're saying, oh, it's inclusivity, blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. You know what I'm saying? This is crazy, right? And it's cronies, but I think it's globalist cronies. I don't think it's your run-of-the-mill crony. I don't think it's like the minister's brother-in-law, unless the minister's brother-in-law is still in Nepal and trying desperately to get out. You know what I'm saying? It might be the minister's brother-in-law. At this point in time, I'd believe it. But I don't think that it's this kind of pedestrian cronyism of the 90s where it was like Hamilton politicians giving Toronto politicians kickbacks. I think this is a global empire being and a shell game. And if you're not watching, they say, well, you're the sucker then, bud. And we're the sucker. We're the sucker. We're the sucker, unfortunately. So I wish it weren't so, but it sure is so. We got Charlie Kirk at the end, and man, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got free speech talking about, we've got NATO and what Trump's saying about Anita Anand's saying about Article 4 and Article 5, and what Trump's saying about the whole thing. He says, what's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go. So I don't know what that means. Is he skeptical? I don't know. But we've got to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody. And if you want